Welcome back, everyone. I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and this is yet another Marvel Champions video. There's been a bunch of Marvel Champions news and reveals and releases and everything the last little bit. We're continuing with this X-Men line, and we have got a brand new hero to talk about, and it's an exciting one. It is Gambit. Now, again, I've stressed this a couple times in other videos I've done recently. Like, the X-Men are not a group of characters, even though they're widely crazily popular, that I followed as a kid growing up, and that's also someone who didn't read a lot of comic books, so I'm learning as I go with a lot of these as well. But Gambit is one I did know about and was familiar with, maybe not on like a deep level, but just one of those characters that always was a bit of a fan favorite and people seem to talk about. So we're going to talk about Gambit. It's a pretty interesting hero and really cool design with what they've done here, if a little bit, we've seen some characters, released in the last little while that have maybe done something a little bit more outside the box than what we're getting with Gambit, whereas Gambit is another character that's going to be using tokens and cashing those tokens in that exist sort of on the hero alter ego card itself. But there are some really cool cards to talk about and some exciting stuff. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start, of course, with the alter ego, which is Remy LeBeau, something like that, and I'm not French. The recovery here is 3, hand size 6, hit points of 9. The ability is really exciting. So this is Thief Extraordinaire. It is an action thwart ability on the alter ego side. It says exhaust Remy LeBeau and look at the top 2 cards of the encounter deck, discard one of those cards, remove threat from a scheme equal to the number of boost icons on the card that you chose. This is, I think it's been a while now, at least, and I could be forgetting, but it's not always super common that we get an ability on the alter ego side that so directly, impacts or interacts with, thwarting or dealing damage, things like that. Like, generally they tend to be more defensive abilities or more passive abilities or recovering cards, things like that. This one directly benefits you in 2 ways. One, you are getting to eliminate cards off the encounter deck, which is always great, especially if there's some nasty ones coming up. And 2, you're actually going to be removing threat from the scheme while you're in alter ego form. So in general, you're probably going to be spending more time in alter ego than some of the other heroes that we've seen recently, and I think that's kind of reflected in the reason why we have a bit of a lower hit point with 9, is because you're probably going to have more opportunities to use a recover, keeping in mind that the Thief Extraordinaire ability causes you to exhaust. You're going to kind of have to balance, which one you want to do, or maybe you're doing one on one turn and then the next turn you're using the other, whatever the case may be. But there is that, bit of a downside to the ability, but it is a powerful ability, so I understand. All things considered, one of the better alter egos we've seen in the last little bit, or at least more interesting. I'm really excited by the alter ego here. Then we've got Gambit. So Gambit, it's funny because Gambit comes as a justice hero in terms of all the cards that are in the deck, and yet his lowest stat is the thwart. And his ability here has nothing to do with thwarting, which is kind of interesting. They balanced him in an interesting way here. So the stat line is 1, 2, 3. Hand size goes down to 5. The abilities here, first one is charge a card. Action, place 1 charge counter here. So you have this inherent way to just always add charge counters. You don't have to exhaust to do it. You're just simply placing 1 per round that you're on here, in this form, I should say. Then we have throw the card, interrupt. When you play an attack event, remove up to 3 charge counters from here. That event deals +1 damage for each counter removed. So basically you're able to increase this to a max of 3 damage for the attack event that you're doing. But there's 2 really important things to keep in mind here. 1, the limit of charge counters on here is not 3. That's just the max you can remove. You can have 10 counters on here and be, completely wildly ready. You can only remove 3 at a time for this ability. That's going to come into play for another card we'll talk about later. The other thing to keep in mind here is that if an attack event, for instance, that you're playing has multiple instances of dealing damage on it, it's going to boost all of those instances, not just a single one. So this is, a max of boost of 3 damage, but there's a chance that cards that say if a card said do 2 damage, then do 2 damage to another enemy on that same attack event, it's actually going to boost both of those, which now instead of doing 2 and 2, you're going to do 5 and 5. Really important distinction there, and it makes Gambit potentially much more powerful if you're able to build around that and find some ways to kind of utilize that little inherent little, I was gonna call it an Easter egg. It's not an Easter egg, but maybe something people don't, notice on the first read. Either way, both sides of this hero card, the alter ego side and the hero side, are really exciting. I really like what they've done with both of them, and it's interesting to see one focus on thwarting, one focus on attacking. There's this nice balance between both, which could make Gambit an interesting solo hero to play despite the low hit points. Okay, jumping into the Thieves Guild. So this is a 1-cost support. This is your alter ego kind of kit card. So alter ego response: after you resolve your Thief Extraordinaire ability, which is your alter ego ability, exhaust the Thieves Guild to remove 1 threat from a scheme, and if this removes the last threat from that scheme, draw 1 card. So it's not a guaranteed card draw, but it is always this guaranteed way to increase how much threat you're removing, with this added potential incentive of also getting you card draw. So, if you can time it in such a way where, you can do your ability and then have the Thieves Guild be the last thing that kind of triggers and removes that last threat, you're going to also get card draw out of it, which is obviously going to, enhance everything you're able to do. It's not the most powerful alter ego support card we've seen. Like, there's some much better ones out there that if you have at the start of the game, wildly shift how successful that game is going to be. I don't know if the Thieves Guild is going to kind of, fall in line with that, but I think that balance kind of makes sense, because I think they recognize you're going to spend a lot of time in alter ego form, so if it was too powerful, you're going to get way more advantage out of it. But I still think this is a good card. It just kind of like matches the amount of time you're going to spend in alter ego, in my opinion. Then we've got Creole. Is that how you say that word, man? Like, I can't pronounce anything. I need to like just start taking classes so that I can learn how to pronounce everything for these videos. Creole Charmer, 2-cost event, alter ego action, thwart, remove 3 threat from a scheme. If this removes the last threat from that scheme, confuse the villain. Nothing overly, surprising or fancy here. It is a 3 threat removal for 2, which we've seen before, but this does have the added incentive that if it removes the last threat, you get to confuse the villain, which is obviously great. And most of what not most, but a lot of what you're going to be trying to do with Gambit is timing when you're removing the last threat from different schemes and things like that, because you're always going to get this added incentive with a lot of the cards that are in the deck. So you're kind of building around that, and it's going to be kind of a fun puzzle to solve, to say, like, I could remove threat from the main scheme. However, if I do it from this scheme, then I'm able to, trigger this extra ability because there's less threat on that scheme, whatever. It'll just be a cool little problem to solve and kind of manage which schemes you attack and win, which schemes you thwart and win. Next up, we've got Charged Card. This one's a cool one. 2-cost event, hero action attack, deal 4 damage to an enemy, 4/2. For this attack, if Gambit's throw to card ability removed at least 1 counter, this attack gains ranged. 2 counters, this attack gains piercing. 3 counters, this attack also gains overkill. And those all stack. I didn't read the also for one of them, but you get everything below it as well. So this is really cool, because the throw to card ability is boosting your damage up to 3. So this is a 4 damage for 2 that can be a 7 damage for 2 if you remove 3 counters. So if you look at it in like best case scenario, 4/2 with the removal of 3 counters, you're doing 7 damage that has ranged, piercing, and overkill, which is obviously complete overkill. And it's great for 2. You're losing counters though, so you obviously have to have the counters there, but you might not need the overkill for what you're doing. You might really need the piercing, you might really need the range, whatever the case may be. The lower ones here with range and stuff might not always be super exciting, but sometimes you're going to be using those counters anyways, and it might just be that you need a card like this to circumvent some issue that exists on the board. And having that flexibility with a card like this is really cool. I could see there being situations where obviously this card is going to just be a resource because it's not worth it to pay the 2 to get ranged. Like, if you're only removing 1 counter, you have to then ask yourself, how badly do I need ranged? In some cases you might, but to pay 2 just for ranged, is that always going to be worth it if all you really want is the damage boost that you're getting from your inherent ability already? So it might not always be, it's going to be a bit of a situational card, but that being said, it's just a cool design, and it will be awesome to see a situation where you're dealing like 7 damage with all these keywords and nothing kind of stands in your way. All right, Royal Flush, maybe the coolest card that was revealed, I think. This is a 3-cost event. It is a superpower. Hero action attack, place 1 charge counter on Gambit, so you're getting a free charge counter here to be able to then facilitate what's about to happen. And it says, deal 0 damage to an enemy, deal 0 damage to an enemy, deal 0 damage to an enemy. Now, at face value, this looks like the worst card ever printed in Marvel Champions history. But the reason it says 0 damage and everything is because your base ability on your hero, on the hero side, which now I'm forgetting, though I just talked about it, the throw to card, removes counters to boost damage. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's going to boost every single instance of damage here. So if you remove 3 counters fully, you're dealing 3 damage, dealing 3 damage, dealing 3 damage. So you're actually dealing 9 damage total to either a single target, split however you want. You could do 6 here, you could do 3 there, you could do 3 across 3 targets. It gives you the flexibility, it gives you a crazy amount of damage for 3, like great value there, and it's giving you a charge counter, so at bare minimum, you're always going to be able to do 3 damage. Now, just doing 3 damage, doing 1-1-1, not worth it for the cost of 3. But the fact that that might push you over to the edge to hit that max number of removals is a pretty big deal. So this is just a cool card. I love the design. I love that at face value it looks horrible, but it's because it's utilizing your hero ability. Yeah, there's going to be times where this is just a dead card, but at 3 cost, a lot of times there are situations where your big attack or whatever is just not something you can utilize. The fact that this one has such a high ceiling, I think is super exciting. I just love the design. It's great. Then we got Natural Agility, 0 cost event, Hero Interrupt Defense. When you defend against an attack, place 1 charge counter on Gambit. For each charge counter on Gambit, you get +1 defense for that attack. Now remember, Gambit has 3 defense right off the bat, so really, really good defender already. You're getting 1 charge counter for using this no matter what, and this costs 0. So you're always going to be able to boost for +1, which brings you up to 4 defense. There are a lot of situations where just playing this card for that, adding that single charge counter, even if that's all you have access to after, is going to just be enough to negate whatever damage is incoming as long as you're willing to exhaust Gambit. And we're going to get into some other cards, or another card that kind of like gives you an opportunity to, ready your hero again and utilize cards like this even more efficiently. So this is just a cool card, and the fact that it gives you a counter for 0 on top of giving you this beneficial ability is just really, really good. So really solid card all around. Then we've got Gambit's Guild Armor. So this is a 1 cost upgrade. It's part of your little kit. Hero response: after Gambit defends against an attack and takes no damage, exhaust this to ready Gambit. This is a hugely powerful card and very important, especially if you're playing, not only, but like if you're playing a protection build of Gambit, or a build that involves Gambit, with his low hit points, not taking damage by constantly being able to defend and negate all damage from that defend. This is the key to everything here, because it makes it so that you're always going to ready again and then not have to be hindered going into the next turn. And you are going to probably be able to achieve not taking damage more often than other heroes because you're starting at 3 defense and you have resources to get more defense. Especially if you're playing a protection build. I mean, a protection build, I'm sure there's going to be builds that are deck lists that people come up with where you can defend every single turn as long as you get this out, and maybe you're just mulliganing in your first hand to try to get this card, to just constantly be able to defend and not take damage and then ready again. It's a really powerful card. I think it's going to be at the center of a lot of cool stuff people do with Gambit, and it just, someone who loves protection, it makes so many possibilities come up that I'm really excited to try playing out with this card. Then we've got Molecular Acceleration. I also think this card's really cool. So this is a resource card that generates 2 resources in the left, an energy and a strength resource, which is really cool. And then the Hero Interrupt is when you spend this card, place 1 charge counter on Gambit. So it is a really efficient, really good resource card that just for using it gives you a charge counter, which we're seeing a lot with these cards. Like, it's not going to be difficult to get charge counters. It's not going to be something that you're like, oh my god, like I'm out of charge counters, how do I get more? You're always going to have that guaranteed one on your hero card, and you have cards like this that just for doing stuff you do already, and this is an efficient resource card to do that with, you're going to get more charge counters. It's just going to facilitate more. So I really like this card. I think this one's really, really neat, and I'm glad they included something like this in Gambit. And then we have the Signature Ally, which is ridiculously good as well. This is a 4 cost ally, but hang on. 3 health, 2 thwart, 2 attack. Reduce the cost to play Rogue by 1 for each charge counter on your identity, and she has toughness. Now remember that there is no limit to the amount of charge counters that can be on Gambit. 3 is the max you can remove, but you can have as many on there as you want. So there are many, many situations where this can strictly just be free. This can just be a 0 cost ally with 3 health, 2 thwart, 2 attack, and toughness, which is insane. And I don't actually think it's that far-fetched for that to be the case fairly often. Even if you just reduce this by 2, it's already wildly worth it, and 3 is already insanely good. The fact that it can hit 0 is nuts. This is just a really, really solid, if kind of unflashy signature ally, but just a really solid ally. I think that this is going to be one of the signature allies that you hits the table more often than even some of the other ones we've seen, just because sometimes cost comes into play or other things you want to do, and the times that this is probably going to just cost 0 are going to be like frequent enough that I think you're always going to be like, I think I can do something here to play Rogue for 1 or play Rogue for 0, whatever. Anyways, really solid card. This is, I love it. I think it's a great signature ally. All right, getting into the Justice cards. First one we have here is Operative Skill. 2 cost upgrade, 3 uses with 3 operative counters on it, max 1 per player. When you thwart, remove 1 operative counter from here. That thwart removes an additional threat. Nothing too fancy, nothing huge to say here. It's just a way to make your thwarts more efficient. You're going to add 1 3 times for essentially adding or removing 3 threat. The reason that this is better than just saying, oh, like it's 2 costs and you remove 3 threat, like what's the difference? This one's just delayed or like relies on other threat removals coming up, is because a member of the Gambit has a lot of cards that specifically say when it removes the last threat, something triggers. This can just make that easier because you're removing an additional threat, so maybe there's more opportunities for you to remove the last threat. But overall, nothing too flash here, but it's still, you know, a solid Justice card. Breaking and Entering, this is a 2-cost event. Play only if your identity has the Spy or Thief trait, which of course Gambit does. Action, remove 3 threat from a scheme. This is simply 2 cost, remove 3 threat. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's a little bit boring. And that's, you know, that's not even a criticism. That's just like, when I look at these previews and look at these cards, obviously I'm looking for all these super exciting cards. I wouldn't say this gets me excited, but obviously it's a solid inclusion in this kind of deck. If like you're playing Justice and you want to be efficient, I just have this feeling that you're probably gonna find more interesting cards maybe to include, and maybe not. Maybe this is so powerful or reliable, I should say, is probably the better word, that you just always include it in Gambit and when you're playing Justice. I don't know, but yeah, just not the most exciting card we're looking at today, probably. Stealth Strike, however, is a pretty cool card. This is a 3-cost event, hero action, deal 4 damage to an enemy, and if that enemy is defeated by the stack, remove 2 threat from a scheme. That's some good efficiency. Obviously, 4 damage for 3 isn't necessarily the best efficiency we've seen, but on a Justice card, that's a huge deal because this facilitates, I always kind of come back to this when I'm talking about pros and cons, but a big pro here is that if you're playing solo, sometimes if you want to play Justice solo, dealing damage is something you're struggling with, something you're trying to figure out how to do efficiently and still, you know, be good at removing threat and managing everything else going on. Having a straight Justice card that deals 4 damage for 3, yes, that might not be the most efficient resource to damage cost, but it's a straight Justice card that now you can include that deals damage, and on top of that, gives you this bonus saying, but we'll still remove some threat for you if you can defeat an enemy with this attack. So I think this is a really good card. I think this is huge for Justice, and I think in a lot of single-player solo decks that are Justice focused, you're going to see this included as just a good way to deal damage reliably. So really cool card. Getting to a basic card, we've got Mutant Education. This is really neat. So 0-cost event. Play only if your identity has the mutant traits. This is very much an X-Men card. Alter Ego action, choose up to 2 identity-specific cards in your discard pile and shuffle them back into your deck. And then on top of that, if the X-Mansion is in play, draw 1 card. I really, really like when cards reference specific cards. I don't know why that's a thing I enjoy. I just think it's neat, and from a design perspective, and even if it is limiting to say, hey, a card does something, but with this specific card as well, it does this, or this tutors this specific card out of the deck, or whatever. I just think that's a cool inclusion. So it's neat already for 0 to take 2 identity-specific cards from your discard pile, which are usually your more powerful cards, get them back into your deck, which if it's low, you might be seeing even as soon as next turn. And then on top of that, you draw a card you could draw into it, and just drawing a card in general is really, really good if the X-Mansion is in play. So big fan of this card. I think it's really good, and I'm interested to see it in some X-Men builds and just see, like, you know, which ones it slots into the best. And then the last one we are looking at before we get to the modular encounter set that's included is Beauty and the Thief, which is a team-up card with Gambit and Rogue. 2-cost event, team up, max 1 per deck, obviously. Hero action, deal 4 damage to an enemy, and remove 4 threat from a scheme. So for 2, you're getting 4 damage and 4 threat. That is just straight up amazing value. Now, obviously, there's the stipulation of a team up here, but that being said, I don't think that that's enough to you know, offset how powerful this card is. I think that it is a very powerful card, and considering that your signature ally, who is Rogue, hits the table fairly reliably and easily with the fact that counters are going to reduce her cost, I think there's going to be more cases, you know, more often than not than some of the other team-up cards we saw, where you're able to get your ally into play and then be able to use a team-up card. And when you hit this, 4 damage and 4 threat for 2 is just super solid. With, like, that's 8, you know, I guess 8 of something you're removing or doing in total for 2. Just great value all around. Awesome card. Okay, getting into the modular encounter set, we got 3 cards revealed. The Minion is Exodus. Exodus has 1 scheme, 1 attack, 6 health. This is an elite minion. Retaliate 1, has Villainous, and when revealed, search the encounter deck and discard pile for the Psionic Shield attachment and attach it to Exodus. So already a pretty, you know, sticky, nasty elite minion in the sense that, you know, with Villainous, with 6 health, it's going to take a little bit to get rid of. And even though the base stats of one are low, Villainous obviously is being added on top of that, and we're going to see attacks and schemes that are a lot higher. So really, really nasty card, but because you automatically go and get the Psionic Shield, this becomes a really, really tough minion, because Psionic Shield is an attachment that gives +1 scheme and +1 attack right off the bat, and also says attached to a minion, otherwise Psionic Shield gains Surge. Force Interrupt is when attached minion would leave play, instead heal all damage from that minion and put it back into play and then discard this attachment. So you basically get a second life on that minion. So even if you do a whole bunch of stuff to get rid of Exodus, deal that 6 damage, clear him off, all that happens is Psionic Shield comes off and he stays in play fully healed again. That's really, really nasty. That means that he essentially has 12 health that you have to go through, and for part of it has a boosted attack and scheme to 2 each. That is just a really powerful minion to deal with. So this is going to be a nasty encounter set when you have Exodus hit the table, and it's really going to kind of change your focus on what you have to do while that's in play. Last one, side scheme, Herald of Avalon, 6 threat on it. Also, it gives you a +1 encounter card being dealt. And when defeated, the player who defeated this scheme searches the encounter deck and discard pile for Exodus and reveals him. So a nasty card that's dealing you an extra encounter card, so you are incentivized to get rid of it. But getting rid of it brings Exodus into play, which brings in a whole world of trouble. So I think this is a really, really cool encounter set in the sense that this is one of those ones that if you're looking for a difficulty spike, like maybe you have a situation where it's like, this is just slightly too easy, but I want to play it this way, or I want to play with this hero. This is a way to sort of just boost the difficulty. Having to deal with Exodus and all these multiple ways that Exodus can hit play is going to make this scenario more difficult. So it's just a cool thing to have an encounter set like this just include and to kind of boost that difficulty that way. I really like it. That's it. That is Gambit. So I honestly, like, I kind of summed it up at the beginning. I think the Gambit is not overall like a big flashy hero in the sense that there's not this huge like new mechanic to wrap your head around, or like this really exciting new spin on Marvel Champions while playing this hero, or anything like that. There's not this new deck building mindset you have to come in with because you can include other cards or whatever. It is just sort of another resource hero in the same way that we saw with like Groot and War Machine, where you have just name a couple where we have like resources being added onto your hero card. So in that sense, it's not super unique, but the implementation of, you can have as many counters as you want, but you can only remove up to 3 at a time for the attack, and it specifically benefits cards like Royal Flush that have multiple attacks on it. He is a hero that is effective at both thwarting and attacking. One kind of focused more on alter ego, one focused on the hero side, has cards that do damage and threat removal. Like, it makes it really interesting. You could play an aggression Gambit build and have all these ways to remove threat while also being a really effective damage dealer, while also having a really high defense and reliable way to defend. I just think that Gambit's got the makings of being a really solid solo hero despite the low hit points, with all the resources that he has at his disposal. Really exciting hero pack for someone who plays a lot of solo. Exciting for me specifically because I just think Gambit will kind of shine there and it'll be really fun. So I'm really excited for this one. It comes out in February. Cannot wait to get my hands on it. Thanks so much for watching another Marvel Champions video. I'm sure there will be another one sometime very soon. I seem to have them all the time now. There's always Marvel Champions news and things to review, but I'm always appreciative of everyone who watches these videos. I love that you guys stick around with me and you enjoy the enthusiasm and fun and just, enjoying this game, that I think is pretty special. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.